Hello, and welcome to another episode of Business and Beyond Feature Friday. I am so excited about my guest today. Attorney Leonard Desir is the founder of Desir Law Firm and has distinguished himself as one of Florida's leading insurance lawyers, focusing his practice on providing aggressive and experienced representation to individuals, businesses, and property owners. He mainly does property insurance. His work ensures that people receive the best outcome in the shortest amount of time for any property damage and or insurance coverage claim disputes. He is married to his wife, Fallon Desir, and she is a clinical psychologist. He has two children, Alexander, who is 5 years old, and Jolie, who is almost 5 months old. So he is very busy at the moment. He enjoys traveling, playing baseball, and watching Japanese anime. His keys to success are patience, persistence, and humility. And his favorite quote is, "Behind me is infinite power. Before me is endless possibility. Around me is boundless opportunity. Why should I fear?" Thank you, Leonard, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Leonard, I know I just gave an introduction, but can you please give me an overview of what your business does and why you got into it?
So pretty much, my business is focused on a lot of property damage related disputes. Sometimes that involves just insurance claims. So people who may have hurricane damage, fire damage, water damage, theft, vandalism, those types of claims for property damage. Or it could revolve around property damage disputes between owners and condominium associations and homeowner associations. Associations have certain obligations to maintain common elements. Sometimes that could be the roof, could be exterior, could be a plumbing related issue or other things that they're responsible for that's causing damage to the owner's property. And I will represent the owner against the association for those type of disputes. Um,
Wonderful. And sorry,
yeah, sorry, no
why
problem.
why did you get into this business?
Yeah. So it was actually one of my first opportunities out of law school, a law firm in Orlando. Actually, well, it was actually in Kissimmee. They opened up an office. They did a lot of property damage related disputes. I was the first attorney that they had there. They have a main office in Miami, but I guess they were expanding. So I was given a lot of responsibility there, and I really enjoyed helping homeowners, go against their insurance company. It can be very overwhelming having to deal with that. So it was a very rewarding experience, and I continued to, do that today.
That so do you only service clients in the state of Florida against insurance companies?
Yes, I'm only licensed in the state of Florida.
Okay. And so we have a lot of issues with insurance companies and the industry in Florida. And so, in your opinion, what is the biggest problem that you see in your industry and how are you solving it?
Um, I would say the biggest problem in the industry in terms of property insurance. I mean, there's a lot of problems. So trying to figure out what the biggest one is. I would say that I mean, there's a big one right now that has to do with a law change that happened in 2023, where they took away attorneys' fees that would be awarded to policyholders when they prevail against their insurance company in a lawsuit. So um, that's a legislative issue. Not I may not necessarily be able to solve that issue myself, but I still try to help people when I can, even in those situations. It's become harder to do that, depending on the amount of the dispute. So, I try to help people, in light of that change of the law by just giving them some guidance on things they can do even without an attorney involved like myself to, try to maximize the chances of them getting compensated for any claims that they may have.
That and it is a shame that they did that, because a lot of times people who have property damage cannot afford the services of an attorney to be able to get the money that they have paid the insurance company for all those years to help them, fix their property or their house or where they're living. And so, how has that affected what you do? I mean, how has it affected the people who are injured through those property damages and the insurance companies just denying their claims for the wrong reasons or no reasons at all?
It's unfortunate. I've had to, turn down some people in terms of letting them know that I'm not able to help them in terms of disputing, wrongfully denied claims or even sometimes underpaid claims just because of the amount that's in dispute. Because at the end of the day, if I have to file a lawsuit and the only way that I'm able to collect is on a, standard contingency fee agreement where I get a percentage of the amount that they're trying to recover, what's going to happen is, they'll end up with, practically nothing or a very small amount of money, compared to what they're looking for. So it's been, a little bit of a process trying to navigate that. There's some people I'm still able to help, but others, unfortunately, because of the change, I have not been able to help.
And that is so unfortunate. And I think, it's funny that it's hard for people to educate themselves and figure out what it is they need to do to fight the insurance companies, because we go to law school for so many years and then have so many years of experience to try to figure out all of the ins and outs of the laws and the statutes. And now people don't have access to the attorneys to be able to fight the insurance companies. And it is, unfortunate that sometimes the cost of hiring an attorney is prohibitive because of the amount, which could be life changing for them, right? Um, and we still have businesses, we still have to feed our families, we still have to pay our bills. So it's not like attorneys can just go, oh, here, I'll just do it pro bono all the time either. I don't hear anybody going in a cab and saying, hey, take me to the airport, but I can't pay you.
Right.
Right. So what do you think people can do in a situation where their monetary amount is not sufficient to hire an attorney because the amount that they're going to get back is just going to be too small to even do anything for them? What kind of advice do you give them? What do you tell them?
Well, they have some options. They can try to go to mediation with the insurance company. So they have something called pre-suit mediation through the Department of Financial Services. That's an option. They could try to demand an appraisal. If it's an issue in terms of the amount of money that's being offered by the insurance company. And and I would say those are the two main options. You know, Unfortunately, if there's any dispute as to coverage under the policy, that's a legal issue, and it's on, any policyholder is not going to necessarily know how to go about disputing that. And typically, without filing a lawsuit, it's hard to really engage in those disputes. So, I would say those are the two main things I tell people. and just generally giving them some information about how to present the claim in such a way that gives them the best chances of getting the claim paid. Those are things that I try to do to help people.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And so I want to change our talk a little bit because this is a business podcast. And so thank you for sharing how you help people and what are some things that they can do. But let's talk about your business and your law firm. As we know, all entrepreneurs and business owners go through some obstacles and some things, especially at the beginning. And I was hoping you could share with us some obstacles that you have gone through and how you have overcome them when it comes to your business, when it comes to being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, so in terms of my business, a lot of the cases that I handle are on contingency fee basis. So contingency fee means essentially, I could be waiting months, years sometimes to get paid. So that creates cash flow issues. So I've had to uh, do things to diversify my sources of income. So I have contingency fee cases still, but then I also have cases where I may be accepting a flat fee, or I may be doing things hourly. So that allows me to not have periods of time where I just have no income coming in, because of the contingency fee case is still pending. So that's what I've learned over time to just incorporate more into my practice. And even it doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be something small. For instance, I've been doing a lot more demand letters now. So, if I do a certain amount of demand letters, it, gives me a good amount of cash flow coming in, where I'm able to pay for any sort of operating expenses or even personal expenses while I'm waiting for, any sort of contingency fee case to ultimately come in.
That is wonderful. Thank you for bringing that up because I find a lot, well, almost all businesses have some sort of cash flow issue at one point or another, and sometimes at different points every year, right? And I love the contingency fee model for law firms, especially, is one that is difficult because of those cash flow issues, because you don't know when a case is going to settle. You don't know when you're going to get paid on a case, right? And sometimes it can be months, sometimes it can be years, as you said. But I think this is something that transcends just law firms and contingency fees because it's a cash flow issue. And from what I'm getting from you is that you are solving that by diversifying your services, your portfolio, and doing planning and budgeting, which is how you're able to kind of keep up your day-to-days and your expenses and still be able to offer that contingency. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so how do can you just give us a little bit of flavor without going into too much detail or anything that, specific to your firm, but how do you kind of do that? What are some of the steps that you've taken to figure that out?
Um, in terms of kind of how I manage like the business that's coming in, or the okay. So I mean, I do budget, like you mentioned. I do know what amount that I'm, have to pay every month for different things that are fixed expenses. Because that's the thing. You at least try to figure out what your fixed expenses are, which could be office space if you use office space. It could be over I'm sorry, payroll could be another expense. Could be, what other fixed expenses could be, various things. I mean, it could be any sort of like subscription services that you may use. Like for instance, I have an online platform that I use for all my cases. So I know every month I have to pay X amount for it. So just knowing what those expenses are, and then figuring out, okay, this is what I need to do to make sure I can cover those expenses, and at the same time, have some money left over as well, to live, because we also have to live as well, to buy groceries, to pay for mortgage, to pay for electricity, etc. So I definitely keep all those things in mind. And yeah, yeah, budgeting definitely is very important. I try to look back at all of my expenses on a, I wouldn't say on a daily basis, but at least uh frequent enough, I would say maybe on a monthly basis, to look back and see kind of what where things stand. Make sure that there's nothing that I'm paying for that I shouldn't be paying for. You want to make sure that the money that's going out is is giving you're getting something back for it. Whether, and that could be for anything, that could be even for networking too, that I do. I have expenses related to that. Being part of different networking groups, some of them have annual fees. So just going back and looking at those groups and making sure that there's some sort of, return on investment there. I spent X amount for the annual dues, maybe I spent money for lunches. What did I get back in return? Um, so definitely tracking those things, and just being aware of what your expenses are. That's very important.
I love that you just said that, and especially about networking, because so many businesses and business owners do not take the time to look at what is my return on investment, right? How much time am I spending? How much money am I spending? How much money am I spending, not just on dues, but on the lunches, like you said, on the coffees, whatever meetings it is, and what is that translating into business, right? Because I found a lot of times people fall into the trap of having a networking group that becomes a social group, because they're not making any money off of it, but they like going, but they're still looking at it as a business networking. And then they don't realize that there's no return on investment. And so I love that you did that. Tracking, making sure that you know your expenses, making sure you know what's coming in and out, that you're not overpaying for things, right? That you're not paying double for certain things, because that happens too. So thank you for sharing that. Making sure that you check and you look at your numbers and your return on investment and your budgets. That is something that is very important to keep track of. Um, so on that note, what is working in your business, and how did you get it to work well?
Yeah, so I would say what's working for me is, my bread and butter is property damage disputes. So, I would consider a niche practice in terms of, I focus mainly on those type of disputes. So I know kind of how the process is there, kind of have an idea of the time frame of, when I will get things resolved. Um, so that's been good. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I've been doing more demand letters for people for different association related disputes. Demand letters for people who may have disputes with, tradespeople like contractors or roofers, whether, they may have taken a deposit and then never did any work, or, they did work, but they caused problems, things like that. And I also do some work for landlord tenants as well. So that's another way for me to get some money in as well. Um, whether that means sending letters on behalf of the landlord or tenant, sometimes even doing evictions on behalf of landlords. And then the last thing that I do sometimes too is I represent business owners that get sued. So I'll defend them in lawsuits where their liability insurance company doesn't defend them or pay the claims that are being made against them. So, they will pay me hourly for that. And essentially, I'll try to get their liability insurance company back into the picture, so that, they ultimately don't have to, pay the claim themselves. So, those are the ways that have been working for me, I would say, to be able to sustain my practice in terms of getting more cash flow in on a regular basis, while some of the other cases that are contingency based, which are the cases that I represent owners against associations or policyholders against insurance companies. Those are contingencies, so I gotta wait on those. So that balances kind of my cash flow.
And so the balance part of your cash flow is working well because of your diversification. Okay.
Yes.
And so it just, are all of those things kind of somewhat related? Because it sounds to me, landlord, tenant, that's property, associations, that's property, right? So it's more real estate related so that you're not finding that you have to go in so many different ways and try to figure out so many different things. They're kind of related, so it makes it easier to know and become, I don't want to say an expert, but to become well versed in all of those areas of law, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I try to stay in my lane as much as possible. It's tempting sometimes to want to explore other things. And at the end of the day, I think it's just a lot more, I would say, for stress reasons, it's a lot better, I would say, to kind of focus on a very specific area, as opposed to trying to incorporate too many things. That's what my network of other attorneys that I've met over time is for. If there's an area that I'm not familiar with, or rather than trying to figure it out, I just will refer it to them at the end of the day. Because I think it's better for me and also better for the client. Somebody who does this all the time, they don't need to figure it out. And I can focus on the things that I know, and I'm able to execute well on.
That's wonderful. So with diversification, stay in the same type of area, in the same type of industry, because then you're going to pull yourself too far away from everything, and you're not going to be able to do anything well enough to continue doing it, right?
Right.
So I love that. That's a great nugget to learn is, yes, diversify, but don't make them so far apart that it makes it hard to be able to be good at everything that you're doing.
Right.
That's a great piece of advice. Um, so this is more on a personal note. If it's a business thing, that's fine. But what is the biggest either failure or challenge that you have faced to this point in your life? And how has that shaped your business?
Um, so I would say, um, so I was discussing earlier about the changes in the law, in 2023 when they took away the attorney's fees. So at the time they had done that, I would say my biggest failure was underestimating the impact that would have on the cases that I was handling, where, prior to that change in the law, my cash flow was a lot better. Um, I was resolving a lot of those insurance cases. And then once that change happened, it dramatically affected my cash flow. And I underestimated that. And, I had a lot of expenses that I was, of things I was paying for, whether it's personal or business, that looking back on it in hindsight, I should have shifted, kind of what I was doing a lot sooner, and also cut back on some expenses, because what ultimately ended up happening is I assumed that my cash flow would continue to just, be the way it was. No, I wouldn't have a big impact. And what ended up happening is, I was building up a lot of debt, on the business side, and even on the personal side as well. So that required me to, get loans and things like that, which, looking back on it, I could have avoided it possibly. And also, I would say, I was going through all of that, and sometimes as a business owner, sometimes you're like, well, I'm going to figure it out on my own, and in reality, you don't have to do that. I could have reached out sooner for help on that, whether that's personal help, whether that's business help. I feel that that was a big failure in terms of not acting on things quicker, not thinking that, things were going to be fine, which they were for a little bit, but, things kind of snowballed. I let it snowball a little bit too much. And if I could do it all over, I definitely would have reached out sooner, cut back on expenses, and changed, my model a little bit in terms of what I was speaking about in terms of getting more, um, cases where it didn't rely on contingency so much, where it's more, flat fee or hourly, which I was not doing at that time. So, that's what I learned. And, so I try to impart that knowledge on other younger attorneys, or people who are just starting out on their bit in their business, to, kind of look to something to think about,
And thank you so much for sharing that. I know that is deeply personal, because we all think, especially as attorneys and as entrepreneurs, that, well, we should know this. We should know how to do this. We don't need help. We shouldn't need help, rather. And it is very sad because we're not meant to be an island, right? We all have different strengths. We all have different weaknesses so that we can help each other. And reaching out to someone for help is, from what I heard from what you were saying, is what helped you pivot, what helped you get over that obstacle that has happened that was outside of your control, and it brought you on top now. It was a little bit challenging because you didn't reach out for the help earlier or sooner. And so thank you for that. It's really, I think for me, it's very hard to admit that I need help. I don't know if it's because of the attorney thing or the entrepreneur thing. Um, but I've gotten and I've learned that, yes, I am great at certain things, but I am not so good at others. And two brains are definitely better than one, right? Other people can give you different perspectives that you may not have ever thought of on your own. Um, so that's another business nugget that is amazing. Reach out to other people, talk to other people. Did you find in did you find that when you asked for help, people looked at you differently, or thought you weren't as good of an attorney, or thought you didn't know what you were doing in your business? Did you find that at all? Or were people not thinking about that at all and just receptive and helpful? What was your experience with that?
I would say that people were just receptive and helpful. At the end of the day, the way I look at it is I try not to be too worried about what other people are thinking. The most important thing is for me to do what is needed. If I need this to happen, regardless of how that is perceived, I'm not necessarily concerned about that. I'm more concerned about, what can I do to rectify this situation? Because at the end of the day, I understand that, look, we're all figuring this out. Um, and even though there might be the perception or, on the surface that, this person has it all figured out, at the end of the day, we're all figuring it out. So, you know, with that in mind, I know that, other people may be having the same situation. Maybe they're not saying it. But at the end of the day, I just know for my purposes, I needed certain things to happen. I reached out, got help, um, and yeah, I didn't have any issues, in terms of anyone judging me or anything like that. But even if they were, because we all judge people, all that mattered to me is that, I was doing something to, to try to right the wrongs.
That is wonderful. And I think it's funny that, and I do this too, right? I think, well, I shouldn't need help. I should be able to do this on my own. And then I think about people like Jimmy Buffett and Tony Robbins, and they're multimillionaires and they still have coaches and they have people and teams that help them, right? So that brings me back to, okay, no, it's okay to ask for help. That's what we're meant to do, right? We're meant to not know everything on our own. We're meant to have, as the saying goes, it takes a village, right? So thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And I think our audience is going to really appreciate, listening to that again. Um, so what is the best way for people to contact you, to work with you?
Sure. The best way for people to contact me, they can call my office number, which is 954-848-2912, or they can email me at my email, which is the first initial of my first name, which is L, and then my last name, Desir, Desir, at thedesirlawfirm.com. So either way, they can reach me by phone, by email, and I'm very responsive. So, they'll hear from me most likely the same day, if not worst case scenario, the next day.
And all of that information will be in the comments. It will also be at the end of the reel as well. So don't worry if you missed it, you didn't write it down, you will have a chance to be able to get that information. And before I let you go, what is your advice to business owners? Just something that, as a business owner and an entrepreneur, you have found worked very well for you. What would you advise others who are business owners and entrepreneurs?
I would say, you know, in terms of, I'll go back to networking. Networking is very important to do as a new business owner. It's a great way to, meet people, and not just for getting business, which, hopefully you will get some, but at the same time, just building a network of people that you can, just reach out to if you have questions and you run into issues, because that's how I ultimately started to right some of the wrongs that I had made, by networking. I met people who mentioned something to me that, sparked an idea like, okay, well, I'm gonna, they're offering this service, I can use that, that'll help me. So, just trusting, the process with networking. A lot of times people think that networking is something that just kind of is like a flash in the pan that just happens all of a sudden. But, networking is a marathon. You meet people, So hopefully gain their trust. Hopefully they like you, like you, and trust you. And at some point they will, start to refer business to you. And even if they don't, like I said already, just having people that you can reach out to is, I think, invaluable. Where, a lot of times I have questions on things, whether it's other attorneys or people who are not attorneys. Rather than me looking it up, I'll just reach out to the person, like, and say, hey, have you ran into this situation before? And because they know me and they've met me many times, say, oh yeah, here's an answer to the question, or talk to this person, they may have an answer. So it's I would say that's the advice I would impart. Do not shy away from networking. Do it as often as you can. And at the same time, the other thing I would say about networking is, try to focus on just being part of maybe a limited amount of groups, not necessarily just kind of going everywhere, and just getting to know people within those couple of groups that you network with, so that you can really build a solid foundation there, and be able to expand your business, and at the same time expand your network.
Well, thank you for that. And I just want to point out at the beginning, I said that your keys to success are patience, persistence, and humility. And I just want to point out that you did not say anything about people reaching out to you in your networks and asking you questions, because I know that you are also a source of help for your networks. And thank you for that, because it takes a village again, right? And everybody helps each other, which helps the world. And it does help your business. So thank you so much, Leonard, for being on the show today, for these wonderful nuggets of wisdom. And again, Leonard's information will be in the comments and at the end of this reel. If you need an attorney that does property damage, give him a call. And if you need a friend or someone to network with, give him a call as well. I hope everybody has a great day.